The bitter Montana wind howled like a wounded animal as Zara Olsen stood alone on the weathered porch of St. Mary's Church, her white wedding dress billowing around her like a blizzard, and tears streaming down her face that even the falling snow couldn't disguise. The year was 1882, and what should have been the happiest day of her 20-year-old life had crumbled into dust when Thomas Henley, her fiancé of 2 years, had failed to appear for their wedding ceremony. "He ain't coming, is he?" Zara whispered to no one, her voice carried away by the wind. The few guests who had braved the early October storm to attend the ceremony had long since departed, offering awkward condolences and pitying glances that burned worse than the cold. She clutched what remained of her veil, a delicate lace creation that had belonged to her mother. The ribbon that had held it in place had torn when she'd rushed outside, desperate for air when the whispers about being left at the altar became too much to bear. Now the ribbon dangled uselessly, split down the middle, much like her heart. Zara hadn't heard the approaching hoofbeats, muffled as they were by the freshly fallen snow. It wasn't until a tall figure dismounted from a dappled gray horse that she realized she wasn't alone. Miss Olsen. The deep voice belonged to Brent Vance, a cowboy who worked at the Rocking J Ranch several miles outside of town. She knew him only by reputation, a hard-working man who kept to himself, with eyes the color of faded denim and a quiet demeanor that contrasted with the rowdier ranch hands. "Mr. Vance," she acknowledged with as much dignity as she could muster, hastily wiping away tears with gloved fingers. "If you've come for the wedding, I'm afraid you're too late, or perhaps right on time to witness my humiliation." Brent approached slowly, his boots crunching in the snow. At 25, he'd seen his share of hardships on the frontier, but the sight of Zara standing abandoned in her wedding dress struck him deeper than he would have expected. "I heard what happened," he said simply. "Came to see if you needed help getting home." "News travels fast in Silver Creek," she replied bitterly. "Always does." He nodded, then gestured toward her veil. "Your ribbon's torn." Zara's fingers flew to the damaged lace. "It was my mother's, the only thing I have left of her," her voice caught, "and now it's ruined too." Without a word, Brent climbed the steps to the porch and stood before her. He was tall, taller than she remembered, and the scent of leather and pine clung to him. "May I?" he asked, reaching toward the veil. Surprised, Zara nodded. His calloused fingers, incongruous against the delicate lace, gently took the torn ribbon ends. From his pocket, he produced a small knife and with surprising dexterity trimmed the frayed edges. "My ma taught me how to mend things," he explained, noticing her curious gaze. "Came in handy on cattle drives." Brent worked methodically, his breath forming small clouds in the cold air. When he finished, he carefully tied the shortened ribbon back into a neat bow that secured the veil to her golden hair. "There," he said softly, "good as new." Different but still beautiful. Something in his tone made Zara look up, and their eyes met. For a moment, the howling wind seemed to fade into silence. Then, with a gentleness that belied his rough exterior, Brent leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss as light and unexpected as the first snowflake of winter. When he pulled away, his cheeks were flushed, though whether from the cold or embarrassment, Zara couldn't tell. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "That was forward of me. You've had a difficult day and I've made it worse." "No," Zara replied, surprising herself. "You haven't made it worse at all." The ride to Zara's small homestead on the edge of town was silent but not uncomfortable. She sat side saddle in front of Brent, his strong arms around her as he held the reins. The warmth of him against the bitter cold felt like a shelter she hadn't known she needed. "Why did you come to the church today, Mr. Vance?" she asked finally, as her cabin came into view. "You weren't invited to the wedding." Brent's voice rumbled against her back. "I've watched you at church socials for 2 years, Miss Olsen, too shy to speak to you properly. When I heard Henley hadn't shown up, I thought..." He paused. "Well, I thought someone should make sure you got home safe." As they reached her cabin, Zara turned to look at him. And the kiss, a smile touched his lips, transforming his solemn face. That wasn't planned, but I can't say I regret it. Neither do I, Zara admitted. And in that moment, as the snow continued to fall around them, the pain of Thomas's betrayal seemed to recede just slightly, like an ebbing tide. Little did either of them know that this chance encounter in the snow would be just the beginning. The following week brought clearer weather but little clarity to Zara's life. Word had spread throughout Silver Creek about her abandoned wedding, and each trip to the general store or post office now came with whispers and pitying glances. Thomas Henley had disappeared, reportedly heading west to California without so much as a note of explanation. Zara had just finished shelving books at the small town library where she worked when the door opened, bringing with it a gust of October air and Brent Vance's tall figure. "Mr. Vance," she said, her heart quickening unexpectedly. "What brings you to the library?" He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the temples. "Books, Miss Olsen. Isn't that why most folks come here?" A smile tugged at her lips despite herself. "Most folks in Silver Creek only come when forced by schoolwork or boredom. What are you looking for?" "Something about farming," he replied, his eyes scanning the modest collection of books. "I've been saving to buy a plot of land. Cattle ranching pays well enough, but I'd rather work my own soil than another man's herd." Zara led him to a small section of agricultural texts. "These might help, though I'd recommend this one in particular." She pulled down a well-worn volume. "It addresses Montana's particular challenges." Their fingers brushed as she handed him the book, and Zara felt a now familiar warmth spread through her. "Thank you," he said, his voice low. Then, after a moment's hesitation, "Miss Olsen, Zara, I was wondering if you might allow me to call on you properly. Sunday after church, perhaps." The question hung between them. A proper courtship so soon after her failed wedding would set tongues wagging even more, and yet, "I'd like that," she heard herself say. Sunday arrived with golden autumn sunshine that belied the earlier snowstorm. After church service, where Zara endured more sympathetic glances and whispered comments, Brent approached her on the steps. "I thought we might go for a ride if that suits you," he suggested. "There's something I'd like to show you." They rode double on his gray mare, heading north of town along a winding creek. The aspen trees shimmered gold and copper in the sunlight, and for the first time since her wedding day, Zara felt something like peace settling over her. After about an hour, they crested a small hill and Brent reined the horse to a stop. "This is it," he said, his voice holding a note of pride. "The land I've been saving for." Below them stretched 20 acres of mixed woodland and meadow, a small creek cutting through the property like a silver ribbon. In the distance, mountains rose majestically against the blue sky. "It's beautiful," Zara breathed. "Only $50 more and it'll be mine," Brent explained as they dismounted. "The previous owner died last spring and his widow's selling to move east. The soil's good, tested it myself. Could grow wheat here, maybe raise a few cattle too." He spoke with such passion about crop rotation and building plans that Zara found herself captivated not just by the land, but by the man describing it. "You'll need a house," she observed. "I will." Brent nodded, then added more softly, "and someone to share it with eventually." Their eyes met, and Zara felt something bloom in her chest, something she'd thought had died with Thomas's betrayal. "Zara," Brent said, taking her hand. "I know it's too soon. I know you're still healing, but I want you to know that I've admired you from afar for a long time. That day at the church, finding you there alone, it felt like fate, though I hate that you were hurting." "Why did you kiss me?" she asked, the question that had lingered in her mind for days. "Because you looked both broken and beautiful," he answered honestly. "And because I'd been wanting to for 2 years. This time when they kissed, it wasn't a gentle brush of lips but something deeper, a promise and a beginning all at once." Zara's hands found their way to Brent's shoulders and his arms encircled her waist, drawing her close. When they finally parted, both breathless, Brent rested his forehead against hers. "Too soon," he whispered. "Perhaps," she admitted, "but it feels right all the same. As autumn deepened into winter, so too did Zara and Brent's relationship. They maintained propriety meeting at church functions, taking chaperoned rides, or sitting on Zara's porch under the watchful eye of her elderly neighbor, but the connection between them grew stronger with each passing week. December brought heavy snow, and the news that Brent had secured the final payment for his land. The town held its annual Christmas social at the schoolhouse, and Zara found herself genuinely smiling for the first time in months as she watched Brent attempt to learn a Virginia reel with 2 left feet. "You're looking happier, child," observed Mrs. Peterson, the postmaster's wife, as they ladled punch together. "That Vance boy seems to be good medicine." "He is," Zara agreed simply. "Never thought much of Thomas Henley myself," the older woman continued, lowering her voice. "Too slick by half. But Brent Vance, there's solid stock. Man works hard and keeps his word." Later that evening, as they walked home through the snow, Brent took Zara's gloved hand in his. "I've been thinking," he said, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. "With the land purchased, I'll start building the house come spring. Nothing fancy at first, but solid. 2 bedrooms, a good kitchen, root cellar." "It sounds wonderful," Zara replied, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest at the implication of his words. Brent stopped walking and turned to face her, the moonlight reflecting off the snow around them. "What I'm trying to say, poorly, is that I'd like you to help me plan it, because I'm hoping when you're ready, when enough time has passed, that you might consider it your home too." Zara's breath caught. "Brent, I'm not proposing, not yet," he clarified quickly. "I know it's too soon after everything, but I want you to know my intentions are serious. I'm courting you because I can see a future with you, Zara Olsen." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "When I stood on that church porch 3 months ago, I thought my life was over. Now I'm starting to believe it was just beginning." Their kiss, beneath the star-filled Montana sky, sealed a promise neither had expected to make so soon. January brought bitter cold and an unexpected visitor to Silver Creek. Zara was organizing new shipments at the library when the door opened, bringing with it a blast of frigid air and a figure from the past. "Hello, Zara." Thomas Henley stood before her, hat in hand, looking much the same as he had the day before their wedding, handsome in a polished way, with carefully combed hair and expensive clothes. "Thomas," her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I heard you were in California." "I was." He took a step forward. "May we speak privately?" Zara glanced around the empty library. "We are alone. Say what you've come to say." Thomas sighed, running a hand through his hair in a gesture she'd once found endearing. "I came to apologize. I behaved abominably." "Yes, you did." Zara's hands tightened on the book she was holding. "You left me standing at the altar without a word. Do you know what that did to me? To my reputation in this town?" "I panicked," Thomas admitted. "The responsibility of marriage, of settling down here forever, it overwhelmed me. But California wasn't what I thought it would be, and I realized what I'd thrown away." He moved closer, his expression earnest. "I still love you, Zara. I want another chance." The words she had longed to hear 3 months ago now fell flat, devoid of the power they once held. "No," she said simply. Thomas blinked, clearly not expecting such a direct refusal. "No, you broke my heart, Thomas. You humiliated me. But more importantly, you showed me exactly who you are, someone who runs when things get difficult." Zara placed the book carefully on a shelf. "I deserve better than that. This is about that cowboy, isn't it? Vance." Thomas's voice hardened. "The whole town's talking about you too. Don't tell me you've fallen for some dirt-poor ranch hand." Anger flashed through Zara. "Brent owns his own land now. He's building a house in the spring. But even if he had nothing, he has something you'll never have: integrity." "You're making a mistake," Thomas warned. "He can't provide for you like I can." "The mistake was agreeing to marry you in the first place," Zara replied evenly. "Please leave, Thomas. There's nothing for you here anymore." For a moment, he looked as though he might argue further, but something in her expression must have convinced him of her resolve. With a curt nod, he replaced his hat and turned toward the door. "He'll disappoint you eventually," Thomas said, his hand on the doorknob. "They all do." After he left, Zara sat heavily in a nearby chair, her hands trembling. Seeing Thomas had affected her more than she wanted to admit, not because she still loved him, but because his return had forced her to confront how much she had changed in 3 short months. That evening, she told Brent about Thomas's visit as they sat by the fire in her small cabin, her elderly neighbor dozing in a rocking chair nearby. "Are you all right?" Brent asked, concern evident in his eyes. "I am," Zara assured him, surprised to find it was true. "Seeing him was like looking at a different life, one I'm glad I didn't end up living." Brent nodded slowly. "And if he'd come back sooner, before we—" Zara reached for his hand. "I can't say for certain, but I like to think I'd have still seen the truth of him." She squeezed his fingers. "What I feel for you is different, Brent, stronger, more real." The smile that spread across his face warmed her more than the crackling fire. "I've been carrying something with me," he said, reaching into his pocket, waiting for the right moment. He produced a small wooden box, simply carved but beautiful. "It's not fancy," he warned as he handed it to her. Inside, nestled on a scrap of velvet, lay a ring, a simple gold band with a small pearl at its center. "It was my grandmother's," Brent explained, his voice low enough not to wake the chaperone. "I know we agreed to wait to give you time, but after today I wanted you to have this, not as an engagement, not yet, but as a promise." Zara lifted the ring, watching as it caught the firelight. "It's beautiful." "Like you," Brent said, and though the words might have sounded trite from another man, his sincerity made them perfect. "I love you, Zara Olsen." "I love you too," she whispered, and the truth of it filled her completely. Spring arrived in Montana with its usual capriciousness, warm, sunny days followed by sudden snowfall, muddy roads that froze overnight, and the gradual greening of the landscape. By April, Brent had begun work on his house, with help from fellow ranch hands and Zara herself on Sundays after church. The foundation was laid, the frame erected, and walls began to take shape. Zara, who had always had an eye for practicality, suggested modifications to the original plan: a larger kitchen window to catch the morning light, built-in bookshelves by the fireplace, a covered porch that wrapped around 2 sides of the house. "You're building your dream home," Brent teased one afternoon as they sat sharing a simple lunch on the half-finished porch. "Our dream home," she corrected, wearing his grandmother's ring openly now. The town had largely overcome its shock at how quickly she had moved on from Thomas, especially after his brief return had reminded everyone of his less than admirable character. By June, the house was nearly complete, a solid 2-bedroom structure with a stone fireplace and the promised root cellar. The land around it had been partially cleared for crops, though Brent wouldn't be able to plant much this late in the season. "Next year," he promised, as they walked the boundaries of what would be wheat fields. "We'll have a proper harvest then." The "we" hung between them, full of promise and possibility. "Brent," Zara said, stopping beneath the shade of a tall pine tree, "I don't want to wait until next year." He looked at her questioningly. "For the planting, we could try a late crop of—" "Not for the planting," she interrupted. "For us, for this." She touched the ring on her finger. "I know we said we'd wait a full year after the incident with Thomas, but that's still months away, and I'm certain of what I want." Brent's eyes widened. "Are you saying—" "I'm saying I want to marry you. As soon as the house is finished, as soon as we can." The words came in a rush, and Zara felt her cheeks warm. "Unless you've changed your mind." The joy that transformed his face was answer enough, but his words, spoken as he pulled her into his arms, sealed it. "I've been ready since the day I found you on that church porch with your torn ribbon." They were married on a perfect July day, not in the church where Zara had been abandoned, but on Brent's land, their land beneath an arbor he had built specially for the occasion. The entire town turned out, curiosity mingling with genuine goodwill as they witnessed the unlikely romance that had bloomed from heartbreak. Zara wore a simple dress of pale blue rather than white, her mother's veil carefully arranged with the mended ribbon. When the time came for their vows, Brent's voice rang clear and true across the meadow. "I promise to stand beside you through all seasons," he said. "To build a life with you filled with honesty, respect, and love. To mend what breaks and celebrate what thrives." Zara, looking into his steady blue eyes, felt the last piece of her heart that had remained guarded finally open completely. "I promise to trust in our future," she replied. "To face challenges with courage and share joys with gratitude. To remember always that sometimes broken things, when mended with care, become stronger at the broken places." Their kiss, witnessed by friends and neighbors, marked not an ending but a continuation of a story that had begun with tears and a torn ribbon in the snow. The seasons turned, as they always do in Montana, with brutal efficiency. Their first winter as husband and wife tested them with blizzards that isolated the farm for weeks at a time. Spring brought flooding from rapid snowmelt that nearly destroyed their newly planted wheat. Summer arrived with a ferocity that threatened drought. Through it all, Brent and Zara worked side by side, their partnership deepening with each challenge overcome. They expanded the house, adding a third bedroom when Zara discovered she was expecting their first child. They celebrated their first successful harvest with a feast that the whole community attended. 3 years after their wedding, on a crisp autumn day much like the one when Brent had first shown Zara the land, they stood on their porch watching their 2-year-old daughter, Emma, toddle after a butterfly in the front yard. "I got a letter from Mrs. Peterson today," Zara said, leaning against her husband's solid frame. "She says Thomas Henley is getting married in San Francisco to a banker's daughter." Brent's arm tightened around her waist. "Do you ever wonder what might have happened if he'd shown up that day?" Zara looked up at him, at the face she had come to know as well as her own, the laugh lines around his eyes, the small scar on his chin from a childhood fall, the way his hair still curled at his temples despite being cropped short. "No," she answered truthfully. "I think fate had other plans for me all along. Fate and a torn ribbon," Brent reminded her with a smile. "And a cowboy who knew how to fix it," Zara added, rising on tiptoes to kiss him softly. Emma's delighted squeal drew their attention back to the yard, where the little girl had finally caught up to the butterfly, only to watch it flutter beyond her reach again. "She has your determination," Brent observed. "And your gentleness," Zara replied, noticing how carefully their daughter approached the fragile creature. As the sun began to set behind the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Zara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From abandoned bride to beloved wife, from broken heart to a life fuller and richer than she could have imagined. "I love you, Brent Vance," she said softly, the words no less meaningful for having been said countless times before. "And I love you, Zara Vance," he replied, the name still bringing a smile to her lips after all this time. Together, they watched their daughter chase butterflies in the golden light of a Montana evening, on land that had become not just a home, but the foundation of a legacy that would endure long after them. A legacy built on second chances, mended breaks, and the unexpected kiss that had started it all. The years continued to pass, marking their life together with moments both ordinary and extraordinary. Emma was joined by a brother, Samuel, and later by a surprise addition, little Clara, who arrived when Zara was nearly 40 and had thought her childbearing years were behind her. Their farm prospered through good years and survived the bad ones. Brent's careful management and Zara's practical innovations, including a small lending library that served the outlying homesteads, made them respected figures in an expanding community. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Brent surprised Zara by bringing her back to St. Mary's Church, to the very porch where they had first met. "Why here?" she asked, puzzled by his choice. He took her hands in his, those same strong hands that had once tied her ribbon and now showed the wear of 2 decades of farming. "Because I wanted to remind us both where our story began." And because I wanted to give you this." From his pocket, he produced a small package wrapped in tissue paper. Inside, Zara found a delicate silver ribbon intricately embroidered with tiny pearls. "For your mother's veil," he explained. "I thought our Emma might want to wear it someday. The old ribbon has served well, but this one won't need mending," Zara finished, tears filling her eyes. "Oh, Brent." As they stood together on the church porch, now older but still so much in love, Zara was struck by how differently her life might have turned out had Thomas Henley not abandoned her that snowy day. How a moment that had seemed like the end of everything had actually been a beginning. "Do you know what I remember most about that day?" Brent asked, as if reading her thoughts. "What?" Zara asked, leaning into his familiar embrace. "How brave you looked. Standing there all alone in the snow, heartbroken but still standing. That's when I knew you were someone special." "And here I thought it was my beauty that caught your eye," she teased. "That too," he admitted with a laugh, "but it was your strength that won my heart." As they walked home beneath a sky painted with the same colors as that long-ago autumn day, Zara reflected on the tapestry of their shared life, the joys and sorrows, triumphs and challenges that had shaped them individually and as a couple. The abandoned bride and the shy cowboy had become partners in the truest sense, building a life rich with love and purpose. And it had all begun with a torn ribbon, gentle hands that knew how to mend it, and a kiss that had promised a future neither of them could have imagined. Years later, when their grandchildren asked for the story of how they met, Brent and Zara would exchange a knowing smile before beginning. "It was snowing on what should have been your grandmother's wedding day, but fate had other plans." And in the telling, the story would take on the quality of a frontier legend, the bride who stood alone with a torn ribbon, and the cowboy who tied it back and kissed her, changing both their lives forever.